The Galactic Council's arrival. The stars twinkled in the dark sky above Earth as the human race looked up in fear and wonder. For centuries, humans had dreamed of contact with other species, but now that it was happening, they didn't know whether to rejoice or be terrified. In the distance, a massive fleet of ships appeared, their designs alien and unfamiliar. Each ship was enormous, with sleek metallic surfaces that seemed to shimmer in the cold space. There was no doubt about it. This was the arrival of the Galactic Council. The news spread quickly across Earth. People paused their daily routines, staring at the sky as news broadcasts showed the sight of the alien fleet slowly approaching. The ships didn't look like they had come for peace. Their dark, menacing shapes suggested a warning. It was as if the universe itself was watching, waiting for Earth's response. The air was thick with tension. In every major city around the world, leaders scrambled to respond. In the United States, the president and military generals met in a top-secret war room. "What do we know about these ships?" the president asked, his voice trained. "They are not from any of the known galactic species," an officer replied. "We've never seen anything like them before. The energy signatures are powerful." "Are they hostile?" The president's face darkened. "We don't know for sure. But the ships are positioning themselves above Earth's atmosphere, and they're preparing to make contact." On the other side of the world, in Europe, the United Nations had called for an emergency meeting. Representatives from all corners of the Earth gathered in a vast, cold hall, all eyes glued to the screens showing the alien fleet. Everyone was anxious, uncertain about the intentions of the visitors. "We don't know why they're here," said one of the UN leaders, "but we must assume they're here to offer terms." But as the seconds ticked by and the massive ships hovered above Earth's cities, one thing became clear. These aliens weren't interested in diplomacy. Not yet. The very presence of the fleet felt like a warning. Something big was coming. The first alien transmission came through the global communication networks just hours after the fleet had appeared in the sky. It wasn't a peaceful greeting. The voice that echoed across the Earth's loudspeakers was cold and calculated. The language was unfamiliar, but the message was clear. "This is the Galactic Council. Your planet has been observed. You are weak, primitive. We are here to offer you a place among the stars. But first, you must submit to our laws. Refuse, and you will be destroyed." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Earth in stunned silence. The entire world was still as they processed the words that had just been spoken. Humanity had been called weak and primitive, and the price for survival was submission. The threat was unmistakable. The fear that gripped Earth's leaders was evident. The United Nations immediately convened, and military forces around the world went on high alert. They didn't know who the Galactic Council was or what they wanted, but it was clear that this was no ordinary alien species. No one knew how advanced their technology was, but the sheer size of their fleet suggested power beyond anything Earth had ever seen. President Charles Davis stood in front of a global audience, his face grim. "The Galactic Council has arrived, and they've issued a direct threat to our planet. We must unite as one, regardless of our differences, to protect Earth from this unknown threat." As humanity tried to prepare for the worst, Captain Alina of the Vanguard, a human military commander, had other ideas. Alina was a brilliant tactician, a leader who had always believed that humans had a strength that went beyond their physical abilities. She had spent years studying alien technology, analyzing every bit of information she could find on galactic cultures. In her mind, there was one thing that had always set humanity apart from the rest: their resilience, their refusal to back down when faced with impossible odds. "Alina, what are you thinking?" Lieutenant Marcos asked, his voice concerned. He was standing by her side in the command center of the Vanguard, the most advanced human ship ever built. It was Earth's best hope against the alien invasion, but even Alina knew that they were severely outmatched. "We cannot let them think we will submit without a fight," Alina replied, her eyes fixed on the massive alien ships hovering above Earth. "We've fought wars among ourselves for centuries, but when it comes to protecting our planet, we are united, and we will show them that." "Elena," Marcos hesitated, glancing at the huge screens showing the alien fleet. "Do you really think they'll back down after what they've said? They've threatened to destroy us." "I don't think they understand who they're dealing with," Elena said, a slight smile creeping onto her face. "We may not have their technology, but we have something far more dangerous, our spirit. We don't bow to anyone. Not now, not ever." Elena's resolve was unwavering. She knew that the humans had to send a message, and she was the one to send it. Back on Earth, as the president and world leaders discussed their next move, the Vanguard launched. The crew aboard the ship, armed with humanity's best weapons and an unshakable will, were ready to face the Galactic Council head-on. As the Vanguard soared into space, Earth's leaders watched with a mix of fear and hope. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew this: humanity was no longer going to hide. They were going to face the Galactic Council with courage, no matter what the outcome. As the Vanguard approached the alien fleet, its crew braced themselves for the confrontation. The massive ships of the Galactic Council loomed in the distance. Their weaponry and technology were far superior, but Elena had one advantage. She knew humanity had something the aliens didn't: a sense of defiance. "We're here," Elena said, gripping the controls tightly. "And we're not backing down." With a determined smile, the Vanguard moved closer to the alien fleet, ready to face whatever came next. The fate of Earth was uncertain. The Galactic Council had come with threats, and humanity stood against them with defiance. The first confrontation had begun, and the entire universe would watch as the story of Earth's resistance unfolded. Would humanity submit to the Galactic Council's rule? Or would they prove that even the most advanced civilizations could underestimate the power of human resolve? The humans' bold message. The Galactic Council's ships towered above Earth, casting long shadows over the cities below. The people of Earth were paralyzed with fear, waiting for the next move, their hearts heavy with uncertainty. The message from the Council had been clear: submission or destruction. Yet, despite the overwhelming presence of the alien fleet, there was one ship, the Vanguard, that refused to bow. On board the Vanguard, Captain Elena stood in front of a massive screen, her eyes locked on the approaching alien fleet. Her hands rested firmly on the controls, her mind working through every possible strategy. This wasn't just another mission. This was the fight for Earth's survival. "Captain, are you sure about this?" Lieutenant Marcos asked, his voice filled with concern. "We've seen their weapons, their technology. We're outmatched in every way. If we provoke them, we might not survive." Elena's expression was unwavering. She knew the risks, but humanity had no choice but to stand up. "We don't have a choice, Marcos. We can't just give up without fighting back. If we show them that we fear them, Earth is as good as conquered. We need to send them a message they won't forget." Marcos hesitated but nodded, knowing there was no changing Elena's mind once it was made up. The crew of the Vanguard had already begun preparations. Earth's best pilots and engineers were aboard, ready to face whatever came their way. The humans were outmatched in terms of raw power, but they had one thing that the Council didn't: the human spirit. As the Vanguard neared the alien fleet, Elena stood before the communication panel. She wasn't just going to ask for peace or beg for mercy. No, she had something else in mind. She hit a few buttons, and the Vanguard's voice echoed across the galaxy, transmitted to the entire alien fleet. "This is Captain Elena of the Vanguard, representing the people of Earth," she began, her voice strong and clear. "You claim we are weak, primitive, and unworthy of existence in your precious galaxy. But I say you are wrong. We are not weak. We are not afraid. And we will never bow to anyone." The alien ships paused. It was as if they were unsure how to respond to such defiance. In the midst of their superiority, they had never expected a challenge like this from a species they considered beneath them. Your fleet may be large, and your weapons may be powerful, but you lack something that we have. You lack the fire that burns in the hearts of every human on Earth. We don't fight for power. We fight for our survival. We fight for each other. And we will fight you, no matter the cost. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. The humans waited, watching, unsure if the aliens would attack immediately or respond with something even more terrifying. Captain Alina's defiant words hung in the air. She wasn't just speaking to the Galactic Council. She was speaking to every person on Earth, every person who was scared, who thought they were helpless in the face of these alien invaders. Alina was giving them hope. The Council, however, was far from pleased. In the heart of the largest alien vessel, the Grand Executor, the supreme leader of the Galactic Council, stood silently, listening to the human broadcast. He was tall, his form cloaked in dark robes that shimmered with otherworldly symbols. His piercing eyes focused on the screen, watching Alina's message unfold. "This is unprecedented," the Grand Executor muttered, a rare hint of uncertainty creeping into his voice. "They dare to mock us. Do they not know who we are? Do they not understand the consequences of their defiance?" His advisors looked nervously at one another, unsure of what to say. They had expected Earth to surrender, to beg for mercy. But this boldness, this unexpected refusal to submit, was a puzzle they hadn't anticipated. "We underestimated them," one advisor finally said, his voice trembling. "These humans, they have something that we do not. This spirit, this fire, it's not like anything we've seen before." The Grand Executor's gaze hardened, his eyes narrowing. "Then it seems we must teach them their place." Back on Earth, the broadcast had sent waves of shock and awe across the planet. People had expected their leaders to ask for peace, to beg the aliens for mercy. But what they had heard instead was defiance, a refusal to surrender. In cities all over the world, humans stood together, watching as the message was broadcast. The streets, once quiet and filled with fear, now buzzed with nervous energy. Was it hope, or was it foolishness? No one could say for certain, but one thing was clear. Humanity was united in this moment. "We are not alone," a woman whispered to her neighbor, her eyes wide with disbelief. They won't back down." Across the world, people began to rally behind the message. It wasn't just the military preparing for battle anymore. It was civilians too. From engineers to students, everyone had a role to play in the defense of Earth. Humanity had shown the Council that they were not a weak, helpless species. They were strong, defiant, and ready to fight for their home. But even as Earth began to rally, the alien fleet made their move. The Galactic Council's ships began to power up their weapons, and the Vanguard was the first target. Alina's heart raced as the countdown to the first strike began. The time for words was over. It was time for action. "We knew this day would come," she muttered to herself. "Now we'll show them what humans are really made of." The first energy blast from the alien fleet streaked across the sky, heading straight for the Vanguard. But Alina didn't flinch. The humans had no choice now but to fight. And they would fight with everything they had. The clash of empires. The first blast from the Galactic Council's fleet cut through the cold vacuum of space, its energy pulse streaking across the stars, aimed directly at the Vanguard. It was a warning shot, meant to remind the humans of their inferiority. But Alina and her crew were ready. The ship's systems hummed to life, and her hand moved quickly over the controls, her face set in a look of fierce determination. "Brace for impact." Alina shouted to her crew, her voice cutting through the tense silence of the command deck. The Vanguard shuddered as the blast hit its shields, a ripple of energy sweeping across the hull. The ship groaned under the pressure, but the shields held strong, absorbing the brunt of the attack. A small cheer broke out among the crew, but Alina's expression didn't change. She knew this was only the beginning. "We've got their attention," Lieutenant Marcos said, his eyes focused on the display screens. Their fleet is powering up again. They'll fire again soon. Then we'll give them something to think about, Alina replied, her voice calm but cold. She wasn't just going to defend Earth. She was going to make the Galactic Council realize that humans would never roll over and submit. With a sharp command, Alina ordered the Vanguard to move into position. The ship's engines roared to life as it adjusted its course, positioning itself to face the alien fleet head-on. The humans were outgunned, but they had one advantage: their unpredictability. The Council had expected them to cower, but now they were facing a human force unlike anything they had anticipated. "Alina, they're firing again," Marcos shouted. This time, the blast was much larger. The alien ships unleashed a massive energy wave, powerful enough to rip through entire fleets in seconds. But Alina was prepared. She pulled the ship into a sharp roll, evading the blast with remarkable precision. The alien attack missed by mere meters, but the Vanguard had successfully avoided it. "We're not here to be a target," Alina said with a smirk, feeling a rush of adrenaline. "We're here to send a message." The battle was far from over, though. The Galactic Council's fleet was vast, and their weapons were clearly devastating. Alina knew that they couldn't keep avoiding blasts forever. They needed to strike back. "Get the cannons ready," she ordered. "Prepare to fire on their lead ship." The engineers and gunners sprang into action. The Vanguard's advanced weaponry hummed, charging up with a power that rivaled the alien ships. Alina watched the lead ship of the Galactic Council on the view screen, its cold, imposing shape moving steadily toward them. This was the moment. With a deep breath, Alina gave the order. "Fire!" The Vanguard unleashed a torrent of energy blasts, each one aimed precisely at the lead ship. The explosions rocked the alien ship, and a shower of sparks and debris erupted from the hull. The humans had landed their first blow. The alien fleet reeled, clearly surprised by the unexpected resistance. For the first time since their arrival, the Galactic Council was forced to consider the possibility that Earth's defenders might not be as weak as they had thought. Back on Earth, the news spread quickly. People gathered in front of screens, watching the battle unfold. They had witnessed Earth's message of defiance, but now they were seeing the reality of the conflict. The human ship, the Vanguard, was fighting back against the mighty Galactic Council, and the fact that it hadn't been destroyed yet was nothing short of a miracle. In war rooms across the planet, military leaders were glued to their screens, analyzing the situation. The humans weren't just holding their ground, they were pushing back. The United Nations convened once again, but this time, the mood was different. There was a sense of hope in the air, something that had been missing during the initial contact with the Council. The human spirit, the very thing the Galactic Council had underestimated, was now on full display. "This is unbelievable," one of the leaders said, his voice filled with awe. "They're actually fighting back. The Vanguard. It's taking on the entire Galactic Council." Another leader shook his head in disbelief. "But can they win? The alien fleet is enormous." "We can't know for sure," said the president, his face grim but determined. "But Earth is showing the universe that we won't back down. We've survived wars, famine, and disaster. This is no different. We fight for our home." The global broadcast showed the battle between the Vanguard and the Council's fleet. People all over Earth watched in stunned silence as the human ship dodged and returned fire with surprising precision. The Galactic Council wasn't the only one with advanced technology. Humanity had its own tricks up its sleeve. Meanwhile, in the heart of the alien fleet, the Grand Executor watched the battle with growing frustration. "Those humans, they fight like animals," he muttered, his anger rising. "They have no chance of defeating us. Yet they resist us with such ferocity. It's maddening." His advisors remained silent, too nervous to respond. They had never encountered such resistance before, not from a species they considered primitive. The Grand Executor turned to face them, his expression cold. "We must break their spirit," he declared. "We will strike them down with everything we have." Let them feel the full power of the Galactic Council. As the battle raged on, Alina's focus remained unshakable. The Vanguard had taken some damage, but they were still fighting strong. She could feel the weight of Earth's hopes on her shoulders. She knew the stakes. If they failed here, Earth could be lost forever. "We're not stopping," Alina said, gripping the controls tightly. "We'll make them understand. We fight for humanity." As the Vanguard continued to engage the alien fleet, Earth watched, holding its breath. The first clash between the Galactic Council and the humans had begun. And for the first time, the Council wasn't sure who would come out on top. The fate of Earth was in the balance, and the next few moments would determine whether humanity would rise or fall. The battle was far from over. "You said, humanity strikes back." The battle in space raged on as the Vanguard and the fleet of the Galactic Council exchanged fire. The humans were holding their ground, their ships dodging and returning fire with deadly accuracy. But Alina knew the stakes were higher than ever. The Galactic Council would not let a few blasts from a primitive species stand in their way for long. They would retaliate with everything they had. The Vanguard had taken damage, but nothing critical. The shields were holding, but each shot drained their energy reserves. Alina could feel the tension on the bridge as the crew worked in perfect harmony, each person fully aware that their survival depended on every move they made. "Captain, they've adjusted their tactics," Lieutenant Marcos reported, his voice tense. "They formed a battle formation. It's designed to overwhelm our shields. They're coming in fast." Alina's eyes narrowed. The Galactic Council had learned from their initial miscalculation. They were no longer underestimating humanity. The sheer size of their fleet was overwhelming, and even with all their cunning, the Vanguard was still one ship. Against so many enemies, survival would be a miracle. "We're going to have to outsmart them," Alina said, determination in her voice. "Lieutenant, prepare for evasive maneuvers. We're going to force them to make the first move." A chorus of affirmative responses came back. The crew, though nervous, trusted Alina's leadership. She wasn't just a commander. She was a symbol of humanity's defiance, and they would follow her to the ends of the galaxy if necessary. As the Galactic Council's fleet approached, the Grand Executor paced in his command chamber. The human ship, the Vanguard, had proven to be a thorn in their side, but that was only the beginning. The Council had never faced such determination from a species they considered insignificant. "They persist," the Grand Executor said, his voice cold. "Their defiance is troubling, but we will crush them. No species stands against the might of the Galactic Council." He turned to his advisors, who remained quiet, their eyes lowered. They had never seen their leader so angry. The humans had surprised them, and now they would make an example of Earth. "Prepare the final wave," the Grand Executor commanded. "If the humans are so eager to fight, we will give them a battle they'll never forget. Once they've seen the true power of the Galactic Council, they will submit." Back on Earth, the entire planet was watching, gripped by the unfolding drama. People of all nations were glued to their screens, seeing their fate play out in real time. Earth had come together, united by the message from the Vanguard. The message that no matter the odds, humanity would not bow down. In every major city, people gathered in front of huge monitors, waiting for any update on the battle. Across the world, even the quietest of towns were buzzing with activity. From scientists to civilians, every human on Earth was watching and praying that the Vanguard would succeed. In a small town in India, a father and daughter sat together, watching the news. The girl looked up at her father, her eyes wide with worry. "Do you think they'll win, Papa?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her father, an engineer who had spent his life building and repairing machines, smiled softly at her. "I don't know, little one, but I know one thing. The humans on that ship are doing everything they can to save us. They won't give up, and neither should we." The girl nodded, her hands clenched into small fists. "We won't give up." And across the world, in cities large and small, people made the same vow. They wouldn't give up. Not now. Not ever. Back in space, the Vanguard had reached a critical point. The alien ships were closing in fast, and the first volley of blasts rained down on the ship. Alina's fingers flew across the controls, issuing orders as the crew responded with precision. The ship swerved and twisted, dodging incoming blasts by the thinnest of margins. "Captain, the energy reserves are down to 20%. The chief engineer, Sophia, reported urgently. "We can't keep this up for much longer." Alina's face was hard with determination. "We don't need to keep it up for much longer. We just need to give them something they'll never forget." At that moment, the final wave of Galactic Council ships entered firing range. The time for evasive maneuvers was over. The Council's ships moved into their final formation, a massive wall of firepower designed to wipe out anything in its path. Alina watched the approaching fleet, her mind racing. This was it. The critical moment. There was no going back. "Prepare the counterattack," she shouted. On Earth, a sense of urgency filled the air as the battle reached its peak. The news anchors and military advisors weren't just speaking. They were praying for the Vanguard's survival. The human race had never been so close to extinction. And yet there was hope. Humanity must never back down, one anchor said, his voice choked with emotion. "The Vanguard is showing us that no matter how big the enemy is, no matter how powerful they seem, we are strong enough to fight back." A cheer erupted in the streets. The message from the Vanguard had united the planet. Every person, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, had one thought: survive. Together, they would face the galaxy's most powerful empire. Alina's voice rang out across the bridge of the Vanguard as she made her final command. "Fire everything we have." In that moment, the ship unleashed its full arsenal. Energy blasts streaked across space, lighting up the dark expanse like stars being born. The first wave of the Galactic Council's fleet shuddered under the onslaught, the blast shields weakening, the enemy ships starting to falter. Alina watched as her crew executed their orders flawlessly. But it was clear, the battle was far from over. The Galactic Council had many ships left, and they would retaliate with everything they had. But Earth wasn't backing down. Alina's Defiance wasn't just about winning the battle. It was about proving that humanity would fight for its survival, no matter the odds. The final showdown had begun. The turning point. The dark expanse of space was lit up with blinding flashes of energy. Every second felt like an eternity as the Vanguard fought against the might of the Galactic Council. The ship had taken a battering, but the humans aboard had proven that they would not break. Alina stood at the center of the command deck, hands gripping the controls with an iron will. Her crew was battered but still alive, their resolve unshakable. They had faced the unimaginable and survived. Now, it was time to turn the tide of the battle. "We've damaged their outer defenses," Lieutenant Marcos reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "Their lead ships are showing signs of instability. They're weakening." Alina's eyes narrowed. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity's ability to strike back. It was true that they were still outnumbered and outgunned, but the humans were no longer fighting with desperation. They were fighting with strategy, cunning, and the spirit of survival. "Don't get too comfortable," Alina cautioned, turning to her crew. "They're going to retaliate. Get ready for their counterattack." As if on cue, the Galactic Council fleet began to power up their weapons, their ships glowing with deadly intent. The massive warships, each several times the size of the Vanguard, unleashed a concentrated barrage of energy blasts. The ship's shields flared as the first wave of attacks slammed into them. Shields are holding, but not for long. Sophia, the chief engineer, shouted from the control panel. Alina didn't flinch. "We've got one shot. Focus all fire on their flagship." A deadly calm fell over the command deck as the crew worked together, the hum of machinery and the steady rhythm of commands filling the air. The entire ship was a single, unified force. Back aboard the Galactic Council flagship, The Grand Executor stood with his arms crossed, watching as his fleet advanced. His once confident demeanor was now tainted with frustration. The humans had exceeded his expectations, but he still couldn't believe they could pose a true threat. This would be the final push to annihilate them. "Prepare the final weapon," the Grand Executor ordered. "This is the last time we give them a chance to survive." But even as he issued the command, the Grand Executor couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The human ship, the Vanguard, had been more persistent than he'd anticipated. It was clear now that they were fighting for more than just survival. They were fighting for the future of their entire species. On Earth, people were holding their breath. The battle had reached a fever pitch. The news broadcasts were filled with updates, and for the first time since the beginning of the invasion, there was hope. "The Vanguard has made a significant dent in the Council's fleet," one news anchor announced, his voice filled with awe. "They damaged the enemy's flagship and forced the Council to retreat. But we don't know for how long. The question remains, can humanity hold its own against such a massive force?" Every nation was glued to the screens, watching the battle unfold, united in a single moment. The people of Earth had come together in a way they never had before, inspired by the bravery of the crew of the Vanguard. From the streets of New York to the villages in Africa, humanity's resolve had hardened. People who had once been divided by politics, race, and religion now stood side by side, hoping for victory. Back in space, Alina's voice rang out, a beacon of defiance in the midst of chaos. "We're going for broke. Give them everything we've got." With one final order, the Vanguard unleashed a barrage of energy that dwarfed anything the humans had fired before. The concentrated blast hit the Galactic Council flagship dead-on, causing massive explosions to ripple across its hull. For a brief moment, the entire battlefield fell silent. Then, with a final, shuddering explosion, the flagship of the Galactic Council broke apart, a massive cloud of debris scattering across space. Alina and her crew stood in stunned silence. They had done it. They had taken down the flagship of the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The battle was far from over, but the Vanguard had struck a decisive blow. The Galactic Council had lost their command ship, and with it, a huge part of their coordination and leadership. The tables had turned. The Grand Executor was no longer pacing his command chamber. He stood frozen, staring at the live feed of his flagship's destruction. His plan was in shambles. "No," he whispered, a mixture of disbelief and rage in his voice. "This cannot be." He turned to his officers. "The humans, they've just destroyed our flagship. We will lose this battle." The officers around him exchanged nervous glances. "Sir, what do we do now?" The Grand Executor took a deep breath, his anger simmering beneath the surface. He was not a being who was accustomed to defeat. His pride would not allow it. "We'll retreat," he said coldly. "But this is not the end. We will regroup, and we will return. And when we do, Earth will fall." Back on the Vanguard, Alina allowed herself a brief moment of relief. They had won a critical victory. But she knew this wasn't the end. The Galactic Council would regroup, and they would come back stronger. The war was far from over. But for the first time since the battle began, Alina allowed herself to smile. Humanity had proven that they could stand up to the might of the galaxy. They were no longer the underdogs. They were a force to be reckoned with. "Prepare for a full retreat," Alina commanded. "We've won this battle. But we're not done yet. We'll be ready for whatever comes next." The crew of the Vanguard nodded in agreement. They were tired, wounded, but they were victorious. They had shown the galaxy that humans would never back down, no matter how dire the situation. The Galactic Council might have thought they could easily crush Earth, but they had underestimated the power of humanity's will. The fight for Earth's survival had only just begun, and for the first time, the humans believed they could win. A new dawn for humanity. The stars glittered in the black void of space as the Vanguard slowly made its way back toward Earth, its crew exhausted but triumphant. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Helena stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back, as she gazed out at the vastness of space. They had taken down the flagship of the Galactic Council, a blow that would shake the entire empire to its core. But the Council would not forget the humiliation. They would return, stronger, angrier, and more determined than ever. "Captain, we've got a full report from Earth," Lieutenant Marcos said, breaking Helena's thoughts. "They're calling it the victory of the Vanguard. The entire planet is celebrating. People from all over the world are cheering, united like never before." Helena turned to him, her eyes thoughtful. "And what about the Council?" Marcos hesitated. "We've intercepted their communications. They're in full retreat, for now. They're reorganizing, but they've lost their flagship. It'll take them some time to regroup, but they're not giving up." Helena nodded. "We've bought Earth some time. That's all we can ask for." Back on Earth, the mood was one of unprecedented unity. The world had witnessed humanity's first victory in the battle against the Galactic Council, and the people of Earth were filled with a sense of pride and hope. The once divided nations, separated by borders, languages, and ideologies, now stood together under one banner. They had all witnessed the power of humanity's defiance. In New York City, massive crowds filled Times Square, waving flags and holding signs that read, "We are one, and the Vanguard will lead us." The celebrations echoed across every continent, from the crowded streets of Tokyo to the quiet villages of Africa. The people of Earth had come together like never before, bound by a shared determination to protect their home. Governments that had once competed for power now worked together, pooling resources and military strength to prepare for the inevitable return of the Galactic Council. The world's leaders knew that this was just the beginning. Humanity had made its mark in the galaxy, and the Council would not let that go unanswered. But Earth was no longer the defenseless planet it had once been. They had shown the galaxy that they would fight for their survival. Back on the Vanguard, Helena and her crew were taking stock of their victory. The ship had sustained heavy damage, but it was still operational. Sophia, the chief engineer, worked tirelessly, coordinating repairs with the rest of the crew. They had saved the ship, and they had saved Earth, but they knew they couldn't afford to let their guard down. Helena walked through the corridors of the Vanguard, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The ship was battered, but the crew was alive, and they were ready to face whatever the Council threw at them next. "Captain, we've just received word from the United Nations," Lieutenant Marcos said, walking up to her. "They've offered to work with us directly. They want to combine our efforts to strengthen Earth's defenses and prepare for any future attacks." Helena's gaze hardened. She knew that they couldn't wait for the Galactic Council to return. They had to be prepared. "Let's make sure they know that we don't need to just prepare to defend. We need to prepare to fight. If they come back, we'll take the fight to them." Marcos smiled. "You're not backing down, are you, Captain?" "No," Helena said firmly. "Not now. Not ever." As the days passed, Earth's defenses grew stronger. The world's nations put aside their differences and united under a single cause: survival. The United Nations established a global defense network, combining humanity's military forces with the technology and tactics learned from the Vanguard. Earth's first line of defense was no longer just about protecting the planet. It was about preparing to take the fight to the Galactic Council if necessary. The people of Earth continued to work tirelessly. Engineers, scientists, and soldiers worked together, creating new weapons, upgrading their technology, and training for the battles ahead. There was no room for complacency. They had won one battle, but they knew that the Galactic Council was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike back. On the Vanguard, Helena looked out the viewport once again, her mind heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. The Galactic Council would return. They had been humiliated, and they wouldn't forget it. The fight for Earth was far from over, but Helena had faith in her crew and in humanity. They had shown the galaxy that they would not be cowed. that they would not kneel. A voice crackled over the ship's intercom, and Elena stood tall, her eyes steady. "This is Captain Elena of the Vanguard. We have achieved a victory, but our war is not finished. Humanity stands united. Together, we will face whatever the galaxy throws at us. And together, we will win." The crew of the Vanguard cheered, their voices rising in unison. They had proven that they were a force to be reckoned with. And as they prepared for the battles ahead, they knew one thing above all else. They would never back down. Earth's fight for survival had just begun. And this time, the Galactic Council would have to reckon with humanity's greatest weapon: their refusal to surrender.